Okay, great. Okay, I'd like to call the Board of Education workshop together. And we're going to hear from Middlebrook staff and the high school staff regarding the budget and perhaps a more general conversation towards the end. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, my dog, from yesterday that we asked a lot of sort of tough questions of people. And so I didn't give them any warning. So I just wanted to give people adequate warning today that the board is, knows what a special circumstance we're living through and has to also look at the public side in terms of how such a large budget would be received. So therefore, some of the tougher questions, all right? It's not to undercut anyone's efforts or work. It's trying to make sure we see our way forward in terms of our board responsibility. Okay, so Kevin, thank you.
Great, thank you, and thanks for coming back. So today we are going to start the budget workshop with Jory at Middlebrook, and then we'll proceed to Bob at the high school, and then he and Chris can also finish with athletics, and then we'll just continue the conversation beyond that. So Jory, go ahead and why don't you take us through the high points of your budget?
Kevin, I think the high school need to go first.
Oh, is that, do we? Oh, that's right, Bob. You have a 1:50 faculty meeting. Yep. So sorry. So thank you. Yep, Bob. Go ahead. Why don't we start with you?
Okay. And Jory, thanks for your understanding. Yeah, for our board members, we have a big faculty meeting, actually a staff meeting right after this meeting to continue with the 75% plan. So thanks for letting me and Chris go first. And I do have at the very latest a 1:40 hard stop. So I'll be relatively concise, but I'm looking forward to sharing with you some insights about our 21-22 budget. Before we start, sincerely on behalf of the staff, students, administration of Wilton High School, we do want to thank you for your support, not just for the budget, but for all the work you do. We recognize that this is voluntary work, and it has grown none easier under the circumstances for everybody involved, including Board of Ed members. So we say that sincerely, and we do appreciate you. The goal today is to present a budget that will meet the needs of our students and our staff and all of our school community. And as we all recognize, there are unique needs at this time, and there will be unique needs next year and going forward. So, that is our goal. We always try to ground our work in what could be described as a practical and a philosophical underpinning. And we have really two parallel underpinnings right now. We are still living with our Wilton High School vision statement, our core values and beliefs, and our 21st century learning expectations. And then, of course, we have 1.5 feet in the portrait of the graduate. So, one of the goals here is to continue just in lines with the vision statement, fostering inquiry, innovation, which is key, creative expression, authentic and personalized learning experiences. And we want our kids to be able to contribute at the high school and then beyond to the global community through what I describe as the 4 tenets or cornerstones of the vision statement, which are leadership, integrity, scholarship, and empathy. And then, from the portrait of the graduate, we've all bought into the mantra for a better world. And some of the things you'll hear about here are, budget ideas that support expert instruction, rigorous learner-centered curriculum, and our students being able to pursue their goals and their personal goals and aspirations so that they can contribute to our Wilton community and beyond. So we do think those are really, really important. The budget at the high school is always driven around students and what their needs are. So it's really all about, what we describe as the instructional core, teachers, students, and content, and a really, really strong, rigorous, rewarding academic program. We want the kids to enjoy their learning. And one of the things I always like to cite is board policy 6151 around acceptable class ranges. And the reason I particularly bring this up this year is because I believe it will be especially important as we focus on next year and beyond when we work to identify learning and content and skill gaps and to really tailor and personalize instruction based on students' individual needs to ultimately mitigate some of the, related learning challenges due to this pandemic. And also, we recognize that one of all of our priorities, the high school, the middle school, the feeder schools, and the board, is to work on our math achievement. So we would like to be in a position to continue to keep our math sectioning low as we did this year, so that our teachers can really work on ensuring that students are on grade level and are progressing with the standards they need to work on. So that will be critically important. And then the next priority that I would cite is just, student social and emotional well-being. You'll notice that we still have, budgeted for some of the important programs that we run, including Link Crew, curriculum days, summer curriculum days for our advisory program, and all of the programs that contribute to this web of connectedness that keep kids connected to school. So, SEL, and then although it's been a little bit tabled this year, the high school is one of the leaders in some of the cultural and diversity issues, and we want to make sure that that is still to the fore, especially in this era of our society. We are very proud, as you all know, because the Teaching and Learning Committee reviewed and the board approved the new classes that we're offering next year. It's noteworthy that we're offering 5 and they all have some budgetary impact, although we always try to bring forward new courses that will not require additional FTE. So American Sign Language 2, there's already a buzz about that. Honors US History, the 2 new music courses and percussion ensemble, and then intro to music tech, which, as you know, is designed to get more students interested in music who may not have been participating in music classes previously. And then the new English course that is very contemporary and relevant right now, Voices for Change. So those do have budgetary implications in terms of materials, supplies, textbooks, professional learning needs. To cite a couple specifics, the Voices for Change book, $2,500 for books for the new course, $2,860 for textbooks for ASL 2, $5,000 for textbooks for the new algebra geometry course, new musical instrument digital interface MIDI controllers for the new music tech course. So those are all, they're just very important because they contribute to our really cutting edge and contemporary curriculum. Our high school increase is, I guess I might describe it as in line with the other schools. I admire Jory coming in at 3.41, so you'll hear from him after me, and seemingly has done great work. But our increase right now, 4.87, is higher than I usually come in, but there's been some pent up demand, and as we all know, there's been things that have been deferred since the pandemic, and so we just want to be ready for next year. Regarding the budget projections, we do have new budget projections that we all saw in Kevin's presentation last week. So there may be some recalibration required. We're projected to be at 1237 at the high school, and it's a new number. It's not the one upon which we built our budget this year. We were banking on a 1273, but so right now, we're down 49 students, and I'll address that a little bit later on. The important thing, as we all know, is that we always work together to ensure that between the Kevin's office, always very, very supportive, and Chuck, of course, and the board, we find a way to make sure we have what we need. So, this 4.87% increase, the overall budget, 18,400,001. And, the big controllables, if you will, as we all know, the big drivers in any budget are personnel costs, headcount, some might refer to it as. So what I'm proposing this year is that we would be flat budget to budget, 86.95 of what I describe as the discretionary FTE. And I'll talk a little bit about how that's broken down. There was actually a Board of Ed question about that we could address if the board would like us to. We answered the ones that we received early this morning, and I think there are a few new ones that we'll take care of. Debbie will answer those. So we're not looking at any new positions. There's no increase in headcount here, although Chris will talk briefly about the trade-off of the athletic trainer for another position. But one of the things that we are hoping to fill that we have not been able to fill is the instructional coaching position in STEM. We feel that that is important. We have one instructional coach at the high school right now. His name is Eric Mendelson, and his work has been absolutely transformative. And Eric has been spread pretty thin, but he's been working with all of our, I shouldn't say all, but so many of our departments beyond, math and science and project lead the way. So in conversations, thoughtful conversations with Chuck, who's, one of the most thoughtful assistant soups any of us have ever worked with, our conversation has revolved around, if we can't find a STEM coach, because they're hard to find, just that mold, would we hire another more of a generalist, because we recognize that instructional coaching and strategies transcend departments. So we would like to still fill that position, but that's something that we can ultimately talk about as we progress through the budget process. The humanities coach, I'll cite one example of just the importance of the program. We have some new teachers that we have brought on because of teachers who have not been available to us due to choices around the pandemic. And so we hired a couple of teachers who weren't highly experienced, who just started, but we thought that were talented from the local community and beyond. And this instructional coach's instrumental role, Eric Mendelson, beyond what the admin team and the ILs are doing, is amazing. Getting these teachers to the point where they can quickly be able to, adapt to the hybrid learning environment, get up to speed with Schoology, learn all of the technology. So it's been really, really critical. And I think the coaches' positions will be critical as we move forward. Let me briefly tell the story of our process. We began this school year up significantly in our budget. Usually, just for those who are relatively new to the board, we tell the instructional leaders, as you build your zeros-based budget, submit what you need. What do you need to meet students' needs and have an outstanding academic program? Because we expect nothing less at our high school. So our initial run, we were up 17%. So that obviously was not going to fly. We all know that. And so we had to make some reductions even before submitting the budget. So we did cut $147,729 and got those updates and those cuts to Mary Ann. For example, and really what the driver was for the 17% increase was there were a lot of textbook requests. And we've thoughtfully deferred some of them. And I think we're still going to be okay, but we're going to have to get them into subsequent budgets. So $86,230 from textbooks we cut and made those reductions. We cut $39,057 from general supplies, and then actually an additional $14,245 since December. We made a $5,000, $942 cut from PD, professional learning, so conferences and seminars, and then another $10,100 from equipment and repair. So, that's part of the story that got us to where we needed to get to. We have a great working team over here with the administrative and leadership teams. We are, just generally galvanized around what's important, which is students, program, academics, families. So the ILs volunteered many of those reductions. So we asked for voluntary reductions. And then in areas where we, did not find enough or things weren't volunteered, I guess we would use the term sometimes you're voluntold. So we reduced supply accounts by 10% to get to, where we felt we needed to be to have a relatively reasonable budget increase of 4.87. So, finally, what I refer to as our controllable FTE, which is the FTE that we work with to distribute to the different departments based on student enrollment. And that's always an important process because, we really want to tailor our distribution or our allocation of FTE to the departments because, as you noted in one of the questions, there are sometimes nominal, sometimes larger increases in requirements in one department, and they maybe go down in another department. So with the 86.95, again, that flat figure, what we will do based on this new enrollment projection of 1237 is we'll be distributing the FTE among the different departments. And I'll briefly answer one of the questions now or allude to it. Board members will notice sometimes, some slight increases in the first draft of the FTE in departments, as mentioned in the question. We distribute that initial FTE or projected. It's basically a predictive analysis to determine, based on historical enrollment projections within departments, essentially how much FTE will be required to meet this number of sections and the number of student needs and the student needs in those departments. So that will change, and we always do those in thoughtful conversations with the instructional leader. So just know that will shift. But in all transparency, with the new budget projection, which is reduced by that number of students, our student to teacher ratio is projected actually to be quite a bit lower than it's been historically. We're usually in the 15. So the range in recent years in the last 5 years has been 15.48 to 15.75, which is to say 15.75 students per teacher. And right now, with the recently reduced enrollment projection, that figure right now is 14.23. So again, while keeping in mind that we want to be able to meet students' needs semi-mid and ideally post-pandemic, and also address the math learning needs, that will be a conversation point, because right now our student staff ratio is healthier than it actually has been in recent years. So let me stop there. That's a good overview. It tells the story. It tells the important things that drive our budget. It gives you an overview of some of the data and the data points and where we began and where we ended up. And, however you want to handle it, Kevin, we can, begin a conversation, or I don't know if you want us to answer the questions we've answered so far that were in the budget doc, if that would be helpful to you. This is the Board of Ed's meeting here, so we're available.
Yeah, I think why don't we just pick up some of the questions that were sent to us, and then we can just open it up to whatever questions are on people's minds or areas of further probing. We'll go from there.
All right, let me I'll pull up the questions here, and I think we should all be looking at the same doc at this point. Our questions are further down, as you know, and some of our responses are a little longer, so I can maybe give you just a more concise response to the high school ones here. So question 42, I addressed somewhat already. I just talked about the overall process of how we, conduct our ultimate FTE allocations based on, hard figures, if you will. The students.
Can I interrupt you for a sec?
Oh, sure.
The shared doc you're working off, our board members haven't seen that yet. That's where we've been collecting questions and responding to them. So
I was just going to ask you to send it to me.
Yeah. So tell them the question and the answer, please.
Okay.
They'll get this in the next.
Sure. I apologize to all of you. So the first question was, WHS enrollment is going down about 53 students. Please explain the classroom FTE projections. Science and English show decreases, and many departments stay the same, and many departments show an increase. So again, in summary, that's the initial projection of the manner in which the FTE will be allocated. But the important thing for the board to know is that once the students register, which they're actually doing right now, what we do is we take a look at the student registration, and we determine the number of sections that are required to meet the students' needs. So the number of sections we will need. I'll give you one example. There's usually 14 sections of freshman English and freshman social studies, and then 2 sections of humanities. So we do the sectioning in collaboration with the ILs, and then we allocate the FTE. But the main thing is working with the budget, with the business office. The main thing is we just never go over. We've got a good spreadsheet that we work off of to ensure that we don't go over. And again, we will have to do some rethinking because the projected decline in Wilton High School enrollment was recently increased based on the budget projection. So we'll keep that in mind as we move forward.
Bob, can I just jump in? Because I think I know that was my question. and having lived at the high school, I understand like how sections are allocated, et cetera. But as a board, we're trying to look at, again, the whole budget picture. And I think, we have said that we want to, mitigate the effects of the pandemic next year. And we've looked at some of the elementary class sizes, trying to keep them on the low end, et cetera. So I'm not sure how that plays out at the high school. And I know you talked about math achievement. So I guess just speaking as one board member, I might understand going for a smaller range in something like math or English. But because there is an overall enrollment decrease and we're looking, to save as much money as we can, I think my question would be, to what extent, could you reduce that 86.95 to something less than that? I guess what I'm seeing is like in an art class or a STEM class or a project lead the way class or a music class wouldn't necessarily have the same impact of trying to do learning recovery as more of the sort of core academics would. And so that combined with lower enrollment, could you in fact reduce that 86.95 and to what extent? Also, you mentioned the new classes. And in every new class proposal we read, it says, you won't impact FTE. But part of me wants to know if that's really true, because if kids, have more choices than normal, or, just expanded set of choices, they're going to sort of thin themselves out, and it could result in a new section here or there. So again, in a very tough year, knowing that we have, need to shore up the learning loss, we want to move forward on math. We said we want to move forward on ELA. We certainly understand portrait of the graduate, et cetera, but I'm not sure that it's quite, that you could not be a little bit more sensitive to enrollment decrease than is reflected in the current budget request.
Yeah, so, right, Debbie, and what we can do is we can look at certainly that, that staff to student ratio that drives it and get that higher, closer to, maybe it would be the mean of the last 4 years or wherever we land on that, in which case we could make some reductions. And so that is certainly a possibility that we would look at. And then to your point about the sectioning, as you well know, there may be, if we're trying to make cuts, we'd be in a position where you have to make even more difficult decisions by saying, A, this is a section or a course we're not going to run, and or B, we're going to run fewer sections and increase the class size. So that's very much on our radar screen. And Kevin actually reached out to me already in advance of this meeting to be thoughtful about if we can make FTE cuts somewhere. I think this is a public meeting. I would add, we always want to try to make cuts and be cognizant of, personnel. So if there are ways you can do it through attrition and thoughtful ways to still meet student needs, there's a lot of variables to consider. But the answer is we can look at that student to staff ratio right now that's quite favorable.
Okay. Yeah, I would appreciate, if there are some revisions or alternatives that we could look at.
Sure. The general supplies, and so the next question was, please explain the general supplies increase. And this is a bit of a longer response, but I'll give you just a summary of it. There are some, one-time supply purchases that are, non-consumables, PE equipment, calculators, reusable binders that were not purchased, during the on-site schooling and the shutdown. A lot of the things that were in this year's budgets really, weren't purchased because they were frozen. So I think that there's some, pent-up requests from staff where they're thinking of, students not being able to share some of these materials. We may not be able, we might need to have to buy more art supplies like we did this year, science lab supplies, so we're not sharing supplies. So, that's been one of the contributors. Also in family and consumer science, these are some of the areas that I analyzed that where there are some increases. So, those are some of the drivers, but we did, the supply budget was reduced 34,547 since the original request. And if we had to make further cuts, we could go back and make some equitable cuts across departments if we try to find some savings. Training, actually, this was listed for Chuck. Chuck, do you want me to answer that for us, or? Okay, those were the ones that were.
I'm sorry, Bob. I was on mute. Are you on number 46?
Yeah, we're on 46. Just a brief response. You want to respond to that, or because a high school question?
Right. Well, I would say this is a question I got for all of the schools. So when you actually look over the past 3 or 4 years, we're nowhere near what we were in, say, 18, 19. But this budget does make us closer to where we were a couple of years ago. We've made major cuts in professional learning over the years. And I think what the principals are trying to do is to get us back to where we were before. And it's zero-based budgeting. So these are the things that further our priorities, and our major strategy for instructional improvement is through professional learning. So is that accurate, Bob?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a good response, Chuck. Yeah. And then there are a few questions that we just received that will.
Can I just, and again, I preface the meeting by saying, I apologize for the questions in terms of, how contrary they may sound. But in terms of instructional improvement budget, the district has also invested tremendous amounts in the coaching model. So I think, have we in fact, we can't have, I guess what we're saying is we have to look seriously about whether we can afford historical levels of instructional improvement under a traditional model and the coaching model, which is very, very expensive. So, at some point, what's the balance? What's the tipping point? And I'm sorry to ask such a tough question, but, we can look at the line and say, oh, instructional improvement has gone down. True, but coaching has, gone from 0 to, to not fully implemented yet, but certainly well on its way. And I understand the vacancy at the high school. So that's the real question. It's not trying to cut back training. It's looking at, if one model is so expensive, where else can you compensate for it and still have professional development be a robust program?
So Debbie, I do absolutely agree with everything you said. And if you look at the time at which we implemented coaching, like for instance, in my budget, my professional learning is half of what it used to be. And I think that's a reflection of the fact that we are relying more on the coaches to do that. That said, the coaches don't work with everybody. And we have other subject areas that we need to address as well, FAPA.
Okay, all right, fair point.
So.
Yeah, and I would add to that just our building-based PD, which we have already cut. To state the obvious, we haven't been doing a lot with it this year. But if we're emerging from the pandemic, as there are so many, content-based workshops that teachers may want to go out and attend, and we want to have funding available for them so that we can impact the specific learning in the content areas. And then, of course, with the expectation that these teachers bring back their new learning and share it with colleagues so that we're helping more teachers be supportive of more students academically.
I would also add, as great as our coaches are, we need to support them as well in the learning loss issue. As we move forward and try to address learning loss, the best strategy that we can deploy is to empower our teachers to look very closely at the assessment information we have on students, where they are in relation to where we need them to be, and then engage in collaborative work around how do we take our units of instruction moving forward and address those learning gaps effectively. And I do think we need to build in at least some funding to support teachers in that process, because this is new. We're facing learning loss that we haven't faced before. So I think even our coaches can benefit from some outside expertise on how to go through the process of addressing learning loss most effectively.
Are you guys able to share with us what the professional development learning would be? Like what the courses are or where they're going or how many people we would be sending?
Yeah, I can send you I have the summary of the detail lines. I was just looking at it as Bob was talking. So we'll package, as we go through the workshops, we'll package the details and send them along.
Okay, thanks.
Could I ask Bob something? Because he's scheduled to be out in like 7 minutes. And I'm being perhaps contrary to the tone that we've been talking about. And I have a concern with coming out of the COVID and out of this pandemic environment. We have 7 guidance counselors. That's an average of 180 students per counselor. Have you given thought at all to the potential need to strengthen that area, to be able to give our students the support, the guidance, the counseling they're going to need? I mean, my feeling is, even today and historically, we've been understaffed there. 180 students per counselor is a lot of kids to be, aware of, conscious of, connect to, help. 180 per counselor right now is the average. Are we going to need more? And have we overlooked that as a possible really sincere and serious need in our staffing?
I think about that, Glenn, every year because it's such an important role.
Yep.
I continue to feel confident that we're appropriately staffed. I haven't looked at it in a little while, but we're generally right in line with the DIRG where we are. So I don't feel as if we're
this year is different, Bob. This year we're going to be going into is quite different from where we've been historically. Now, that's just my concern.
Yeah. Well, so again, just to finish the data point and then to speak to your concern, we're under 200 right now. Obviously, would we love to be at 150? That would be wonderful. We learned recently that we have a projection for decreased enrollment and not a small number. What you're saying, Glenn, is very true. I can tell you that everybody on this mental health team over here is going more than full throttle.
Yep, sure.
Including all the school psychs, the social workers, and the school counselors that you're referring to. Yeah. So the point that you're getting at about how important it will be and how important it is right now to support students specifically with SEL learning needs, challenges within their family, the family structure, the economical impact about people losing their jobs. We could all go on and on and on. Yeah. Has to be privileged, to use that term, in addition to the college piece. And yeah. I think that's the challenge with the school counselors. We're finding our way and our footing to ensure that we're meeting the needs that you're referring to, while also getting kids ready for post-secondary. So I would never cut us right now, but from where I sit, I would not propose adding an 8th school counselor.
All right, well, I just want you to feel free. I mean, as the year progresses, as we get into the year, if flags are raised and come up, don't be hesitant about coming to us and asking for help. Okay, it's just too serious, and it's just too important to these kids to shortchange in this environment.
Glenn, to your point, there is an increase in social work time. I thought that was directed at the high school.
I thought the same.
Yep, it is.
It is.
And where do I find that? Help me understand where I find that.
Social workers are in the student services budget, Glenn.
Oh, in your budget?
Yeah, that's where they're all housed.
Yeah, but not in the high school's budget. Okay. Well, social work cover, a lot of ground. I'm just concerned about high school. That's where our kids, I don't know. I'm just scared. I really am.
That's why we're adding some support to the high school. We've added some support. We're adding some support. I agree with you, and so we have it focused there.
All right, yeah. Rob, don't be bashful, please.
Thank you, Glenn. Very much appreciated.
Okay, I mean that sincerely. If you need the support, you need more, let us know. Don't hesitate.
Thank you.
my other question is financial or just nits and gnats, nothing, there's nothing that jumped out as a major, question or issue from the financial side. So I'm fine.
Great. Bob, what time are you scheduled to head to your faculty? Is that about now?
Yeah, it's about now, just to be ready to go. I could stay on maybe 3 more minutes or so I figure about 1:40, I've got to get going here.
All right, I'm going to ask you and Chris to come back tomorrow so we can review the athletics budget.
Well, Chris can stay.
Oh, fine. Okay. All right, great.
Any other questions for the high school principal or observations?
Bob, I'm going to ask the same question I asked everybody else. If there are 2 things, you don't have to give an answer today, but if there are 2 things that you could cut from your budget, what would it be?
Okay. Let me be a little more thoughtful about that, Jen. I have ideas, but
Yep, it's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And I know how much work goes into this, as with all the principals. So thank you and all the staff that's worked on this. And we totally realize there are no frivolous, extraneous, nice to have requests in here. We're just needing to make some tough ask some tough questions and make some tough decisions. So thank you.
Understood. And again, thanks for your support, everybody. And we're going to go work on the next steps, launching the 75%.
I know. Good luck. Good luck.
Thanks. Bye.
All right.
All right, Mr. McDougall, you're up with athletics. So why don't you just take us through kind of what you're imagining for programming, teams, games, and then the supply provisions is always a good question, and then we can talk about the proposal to shift the weight room trainer to an athletic trainer.
Okay. I think I caught most of what you said, Kevin, but it cut out on me. But to start out with, I did a zero-based budget. Just wiped it out, started with 0. I met with every single program, all the sports, and met with their head coaches, and we talked about their wants and their needs. Needs obviously being a priority and what would be nice to have as far as their program, and things like that. So basically all their wants were taken out and their needs were put in, what they need to be able to play the game. Went through officials, went through buses, certain things are automatically going up every single year. The officials go up every single year. The buses go up every single year. And salaries go up every single year. Those are things that I can't control, but we try to manage them as best we can. So, so basically as far as the equipment, that is what we need to play. There are new rules coming in. Baseball, for example, a ball has to have a certain stamp on it. So we had to purchase new baseballs for this year, which we weren't expecting, but we were okay. We were able to do that. So that's just an example of things. Rules keep changing from year to year, and we don't know until the season before. So that's the basic why for the budget. I attempted to add 2 coaches, one for boys, one for girls for lacrosse, but we cut that because the needs are needed elsewhere in education. So I'm not concerned about that. Ideally, I still want to be able to have 2 coaches per team, per level, but that'll be something that we'll continue to work for in the future. More priority goes to the athletic trainer, which I've asked for a couple of years. So I put that in again this year, but this year with a plan. So the plan was, get that second trainer to add safety. We have almost a half a mile from one end to our playing fields to the other where our athletes play. And if only one trainer is on site and they just happen to be at the furthest end and an emergency happened all the way down on the football field, it could be too late. So, granted, all our coaches and things like that are certified in first aid and CPR, and but the risk is just too great. So having a trainer at both ends of the property would help that tremendously. The thought was to those trainers on days that we don't have as many contests going on, the trainers would act as our fitness trainer in the fitness center. And so that person that is currently in there wouldn't be needed anymore. They can pull double duty. Both of our athletic trainers are also certified personal fitness people. So they could do that job as well as their athletic training duties. And it wouldn't take anything away from our students. It would only enhance it. And they could actually work with our coaches specifically on their warm-ups, their conditioning programs before and after the season, preseason. It would help everybody, I believe, in a much better way.
So Chris, my accounting, we talked quite a bit about this position a year ago, and the way that I left it was I wasn't supporting it at the time because we were supplementing with contracted service. And so I think, your point about having trainers at each end of the campus makes a lot of sense to me. And then replacing the weight room fitness trainer with this person also makes sense. So that won my own support as we've been developing this budget. Does that also mean that we should be able to pick up a little bit of savings in the contracted service line, since we wouldn't then be contracting out for additional athletic training support?
Yes. We wouldn't need substitute athletic trainers with two of them here. I would imagine that one of the two could always be here. I mean, we haven't had an issue this year at all. I think one time we had to have a substitute come in. That was in the fall, but with two of them here all the time, I strongly believe we would not need that service.
Well, you'll get no quarrel from me on this request because I think I've been asking it ever since I was on the board. Are you sure you don't need another trainer?
You want to give me a third one?
No, I'm not doing that. But certainly, to me, a strong argument is our facility is so big and there's so much going on at once that safety's got to come first. And this seems like it's more secure than either doing an outside consultant or trying to piece together some other portions of people. So anyway, and plus there's so many offsets. I'm not sure that, I don't know what the net gain on the budget is, but it is reduced from a traditional salary level. Am I right?
You are right.
Okay.
You're right. And you can take one of the 0.5 employees that you have now and offer them the 1.0, the additional 0.5, and save on the benefits as well. It's not like you're picking up another benefit package.
Okay.
All
right.
So it's a win-win all the way around.
Okay, thanks. Good to know. And the coaches for lacrosse, Chris, does that have anything to do with safety?
No, I mean, always an extra set of eyes is safety related, but they've been dealing with 5 coaches for both programs. It'd be a luxury this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Speaking of lacrosse, Chris, the big increase in going through all the details, by sport, the equipment request in lacrosse is like triple or quadruple what happened historically. What is there something special happening for lacrosse?
Uniforms.
There's uniforms. Okay.
Uniforms. Yep. And surprising how expensive boys lacrosse uniforms are when it's just shorts and a t-shirt. But they're a little bit more than shorts and a t-shirt, and especially on the boys' side, they're getting hit with sticks, and those shirts can rip. So they need to be high quality.
Yeah. Okay. So because it's like $7,500, which is much more than what it's been in the last few years. Okay.
Yeah. Not quite as expensive as a football uniform, but they are expensive.
Yeah. A couple of questions, Mary Ann, on the accounting side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In some cases, like for next year, if you look at football boys, all of a sudden there's a $4,000 Social Security expense in that category that hasn't been there for the past few years. Okay. Which impacts his increase year over year.
It does. It's going to be through most of the athletics because again, this is going to run through what the position budgeting is doing for us in New World, is bringing the true expense for those employees down. And FICA is one thing that was always under the district.
Right.
It was never brought to the individual sports and the coaches.
Right.
So you're going to start to see that come in.
Right. So I think it's important to understand that when we look at percentages of increase, the total dollars are no different than they were historically. It's just the dollars were in the district area, I mean, in most of those cases. Now it's showing up in the athletic budget.
Right, I believe this is the first year where we went straight through the athletics to make sure
Yeah.
that it was all there.
Yeah, so that's
Mhm.
important to note when you look at the percentage increases in of course, his budgets, that it's driven by a number that's historically been somewhere else. Nothing that he did or nothing that he's asking for.
And Glenn, just a bit of history on that too, because
Yeah.
a lot of other districts have budgeted the way we used to, where they put it in the district, medical, social security, things like that, the extras.
Right.
We're in the district level, and it's actually changing. Well, it has to change now. The ESF report that's done annually,
Right.
the state wants the expenditures to be where the people are, including
Right.
medical. So we're kind of ahead of the game with a lot of districts, because seeing the emails, we're getting them where they need to be. And this is the first year that they are exactly where they need to be, because unfortunately I have to say, Marianne has done a phenomenal job in the past of estimating everything without having the tools. So next year you'll have a great comparison between them.
Yeah, because it does add up very quickly.
Yes, but
Yeah.
it's a wash.
And so I think it's important to note that, to be aware of that as we look through when we were doing a percentage increase this year over last year. Maybe nothing that he's asking for, it's just an accounting issue that we've been. Okay, good, great, thank you.
Chris, are there other extraordinary equipment requests that are in your budget here, but just not without the detail described?
Not that off the top of my head. Anything that was significant, it was more or less uniforms, nothing other big equipment type thing. It was probably uniforms.
I didn't say anything. The lacrosse uniform, the lacrosse equipment was the one that really.
Yeah, that's a big one, no question. That's a big one. Yeah, we try to do new uniforms every 5 years, and I've skipped a few times. Some of them have stretched it to 6 and 7, but yeah, for the most part, we try to stick with 5.
Chris, do parents of students that play ever contribute anything towards uniforms, assuming they can?
Occasionally a booster club, if they don't want to wait their 5 years, if they're really, the white uniforms really get dingy pretty quickly. So occasionally a booster club will offer to pay for the uniforms. And if they do that, then I restart their clock, and from there, from the time their new uniforms come in.
I think basketball historically has done that.
Basketball has, and
Yeah.
this, not recently, but yeah, they have done that in the past. Yeah, especially with the white uniforms. Yeah.
Certainly have.
How are we on collection rates and participation fees? Are you meeting the targets that you anticipated?
As far as the target of 120, I'm not 100% sure. I do know 100% of our athletes have paid or they're waived, one of the two, because Lynn does an extremely good job making sure everybody gets their money turned in. So that's
I paid mine.
We're collecting.
Kevin paid it. We had to warn Kevin, but he did pay.
Yeah, what's participate? Do you have participation numbers this year? It's a good question. I was curious about that myself. Just fall to fall and winter to winter.
Yeah, I will have to update that. The winter one we don't have because it started so late. So I will get that updated for you and send it over. I do know our numbers are obviously be a little bit higher next year. Maybe not the fall numbers because they were pretty high this year, surprisingly enough. But the winter numbers will go up, and spring obviously hasn't happened yet. So, but as soon as I have all those, I'll forward them up.
This is not a budget related question, but just a general question. Have we gotten any guidance yet about baseball?
Baseball is coming in, the guidance is, actually our baseball coach is on the state committee, so he's been updating me periodically, but they haven't made any final decisions, so.
But does it look like it's going to happen?
Oh, we're happening. We're the spring sports, we're gonna have state playoffs and everything.
Fantastic, great.
Yeah.
All right, great. That's the best news I've heard. That's great.
I agree.
Great. Other athletics questions?
I think it was one travel related question, and it was showed in the high school side, not in the. Let me get back here. Where did I see? Where was it in the high school side? Darn.
Glenn, I'm going to ask a question while you're looking. Oh, you found it?
I have a field and athletic trips for the high school. Are those field trips for the high school not athletic trips? They're not on a high school budget. All the athletic trips are in your budget, right, Chris?
Yes, yeah.
No,
My-
but are you looking at the summary page, Glenn?
Yeah, I'm looking at 46,943.
Then they're
But
combined.
right, if you're looking at the summary page, which is more like the Excel format, not the printout from New World, that's going to combine.
Both field and.
Both.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
yes,
Okay, because that was a big increase, like $24,000 increase.
Mhm.
yes.
And
That's going to be athletics plus
Plus,
whatever else.
the field.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Thanks for explaining that. Great.
Mhm.
As far as I know, the bus company goes 4% every year.
Yeah. Okay.
So. Jen, did you have a question?
Yeah, you guys were talking about do students already pay a fee to play a sport. Is that what you guys were just talking about?
Yeah, the 125 per team. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Mhm. Anybody else have a question?
I don't think so. Thanks a lot, Chris. Just one question. Do you anticipate any fallout or changes next year because of COVID? Are people just gonna, start where they left off? Are you gonna need to do any extra training? I just don't know what a year of reduced athletics is gonna mean for next year. Any serious repercussions?
No, I don't think so. The only sport that hasn't been able to do anything at all really is wrestling. I mean, football had their 7-on-7 and the CIC has proposals. We may even have football this spring. There's a possibility of 10-day football for this spring, possibly, provided we get approval. They're working on some summer mitigating things for football too. So those two sports would be the only extra stuff. When you really think about it, those football and wrestling, there will be a little fallout because with COVID happening and not being able to wrestle this year, the sophomores that didn't wrestle, they'll be seniors when they come back. So it's been almost a year and a half, 2 years. So there's going to be some relearning, especially both of those high contact sports. So I'd worry a little bit about that, but we're looking forward, and the CIC is working on it along with some state committees. We're all working together to try to get some extra educational stuff for those kids so they just don't come in. They don't really, the special teams alone in football can be very, very dangerous, and they haven't done that. Some of these kids haven't done that at the high school level at all. Because the last time maybe they saw that was 7th grade, and now they're going to be freshmen. So those are all things that everybody's looking at.
All right, thanks.
That's very good, Chris. I think the details are great, and very good. Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
In this environment.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Chris, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Great. All right, Jory, you're up, Middlebrook.
All right, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and certainly thank you all for your time on this. I want to certainly echo Bob's comments that he led with, and really thanking you publicly for your incredible amount of hours, volunteer hours that you put in, certainly on behalf of all of the kids and students and staff of our district. So thank you. I'll say that publicly. And I also want to thank our Middlebrook team here, both our leadership team and our administrative team, for the work and effort to put together our budget that really piggybacks a lot on, Kevin, I love the sheet you used in the Board of Ed presentation that kind of captured, I think, a lot of what we do anyway, but that idea what the promise is, and that we promise the fact that families entrust their children to us, and we take that responsibility very seriously. And we recognize that a big part of that trust is their health and safety, their well-being, but also creating really challenging and authentic learning experiences that come from staff creating personalized learning opportunities and really working hard to cultivate partnerships with students and with families. So that's kind of the overarching umbrella for everything you're going to hear from me. I would like to say that we have one priority, and that one priority is that we should give all kinds of money to Karen Lamantia, because this building doesn't run without Karen Lamantia in our way and helping us make sure not only we do things right here, but relative to this budget and the fact that this budget was put together thanks to her. So I just want to give her some public love right here. What I'm going to share with you is our budget that really falls into three categories or three priorities. The first priority is the teaching and learning, the academic preparation. The second is the social emotional well-being. And the third is really our facility infrastructure, which is in need of help. So as far as that first priority is concerned, teaching and learning, we're, at present, as you all know, we're working on a new Bell schedule. And that Bell schedule is going to add considerable time to math instruction. And in doing so, will have an impact on other disciplines. And for this coming year, we're trying to do it in such a way that does not impact FTE in the coming year. I think it's nice to use a little anecdotal evidence towards what we're doing this year, despite COVID, despite masks, despite remote learning and hybrid teaching and learning, et cetera, is a comment from a colleague and friend, Phyllis Boozer, who many of you know and like. And she said, Middlebrook is expecting students to work. They're expecting them to learn. They're not just taking the year off. So as much as we spend time talking about how different the school is and how different the learning process is, here's someone who is tutoring and teaching kids outside of school. So she's recognizing that there is still a heavy lift relative to the learning experiences that are challenging and authentic for our students. And that's despite all the trials of COVID and realizing and recognizing that student outcomes still do matter to us. Recognizing that the children that are in our building only have one shot at 6th grade, have only one shot at 7th grade, have only one shot at 8th grade. So understanding that as a backdrop, we recognize that that's something that we want to be very respectful about. Moving forward, something that I want you to think about in the back of your head is the idea of trying to fund a homework club, something that with our altered schedule and shifts in support services are going to move us in an arena where we want to give more focused attention to executive function skills for not only just our most troubled learners, but all learners, and giving an opportunity for kids to get their homework done while they're on site. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And I will make my ploy here that there's really no room to cut this budget for Middlebrook. It's lean as it is. And Marianne, I'm glad you're on here. You even commented how there wasn't much here to begin with. So I'm going to quote you in saying that while you're sitting here. But it's worth looking at briefly where we are this year to understand the importance of what we're asking for this year. There are significant funds that were frozen as of March last year, were not spent last year, that were then frozen again this year. So there are percentages ranging from anywhere from 5% in the math department to over 100% in our athletics department that have not been spent since last March. So there's an incredible impact, if you think about that, over the last 18 or so months of why there's a need for certain increases in certain departments. And I won't go line by line on that, but you get the idea. But in our proposed budget, when you think about language arts having an increase of 20-something thousand dollars, 49% of that was frozen and not used last year. 75% for academic interventionists, that was 75% of that budget that wasn't used. Program improvement, 91% of that budget was frozen and not used. So I'm broad brushing that a little bit, but just to give you an idea, there's been incredible impact from a year ago, roughly now, that has impacted us overall in terms of what we've been able to do. Now, there have been certain savings relative to when the kids weren't in the building and then when we were in a hybrid model. But as you well know, as you're building out a budget for the next year, our hope is that we're going to be moving farther and farther away from our COVID days, if you will. The second priority I mentioned was the social emotional well-being. And really our self-care issues are quite frankly very alarming. And the status of the social emotional well-being of everybody, I'm not just talking about students, I'm talking about staff as well, is something that I really wanted to highlight today. I don't need to describe the year we've had. I know you recognize that we remember and know what we've been through, but the impact on our students and our staff has been tremendous. Teaching is not the same anymore. If you were, some of your board members visited some of our classrooms, it's probably going on 2 months ago now, and saw how very different the classroom setting is. And when you think about the professionals that are working here, it isn't what they signed on to do, and yet they're trying to do their very best by children now. And honestly, I'm gravely concerned about the emotional well-being of our staff and students in this present setting. You know, we work so hard over years to try to make connections with students and find that trusted adult, and now so much of it is happening behind a mask or through a screen, and that's so very difficult to do. It's gotten to the point where you only feel guilty, almost feel guilty doing certain things or not doing certain things. You know, an example is, you know, throughout the year, we had a point where teachers were pressing for more teacher-directed time. I just need time as a professional for myself to be able to manage my time a little better. And, you know, I think personally that had a lot to do with their need to be able to take a breath and recognize that there are so many individual needs that they wanted to address in their classrooms and on the screens. You know, personally, I wish I had money as a principal to just have free coffee and bagels once a week for teachers. If nothing else, just to give a little attaboy or attagirl every now and then. But I'm not quite sure where that goes in the budget, you know, quite frankly. So there's a need to acknowledge the incredibly heavy lift that our staff are doing, and for that matter, that our students are doing. I think about the field trips, the 8th grade fun activities that typically happen at the end of the year, that we're having to come up with alternative ways to do that, to try to celebrate our kids in different ways that are not able to happen. And some of us on this call have had our own children that have graduated from schools and didn't get the experience of a true graduation. And the same is true for our students here at Middlebrook. But staff are bending over backwards as they can. And honestly, they could snap if we're not careful. And I just want us to be really aware of all of these pieces. Using that analogy of putting your own oxygen mask on first, we need to make sure that we're giving our teachers their oxygen mask so that they can in turn take care of our students. Our budget more than ever, I think, needs to account for that well-being and our caregivers. Otherwise, who else takes care of the caregivers? It needs to be us. Then and only then, I think, can they then in turn properly take care of the kids. And I think of that impact on student learning in itself. So the social emotional well-being of our students then can create that supportive, trusting, respectful environment that adults will create. But that needs to be the focus of our time moving forward in our budget and where we put our time and energy and effort. But trying to make sure that relationships are the things that we're working on to create engaged and focused on connectivity with our students, no matter where they're learning, if they're in the building or if they're remote. We've gone to great lengths to make sure that we have initial and continued reach outs to our remote families and really checking in on them and seeing what we could do differently or better to make sure they feel connected. Morale at the book overall, I think, is on the rise. It was not good. It hadn't been good prior, but I think we're moving in the right direction. I think some of the things I can point to are the smiles that are coming through the masks. And I think that that's an important piece to recognize, that people are still smiling through their masks. And you think about what kids are going through and how that feels. It's pretty rotten to have to wear a mask all day. We have to create opportunities in the day to create mask breaks. Comments that come from students and families that say, thank you for the support. We appreciate that you love and respect us and are taking care of us. You know, there are conversations that I hear all the time about thanks for the positive message in a meeting from staff. That too, I think, goes a long way towards people realizing that they are being noticed, if you will, and noticed for the heavy lift. And all this is despite the year of COVID, despite a year of dealing with Schoology. And what the heck was that? What is that new thing that we're dealing with as of last spring? And the technology frustrations that came with it as well. And face coverings, like I mentioned, hybrid teaching, and now recently 4-day programming. Just come in the building, you can see it, you can hear it. Staff want to be here for the children. They are worried about the children. They are across the district. I'm sure that this board has heard that from different principals or different teachers as you have those conversations. But you've heard about the engagement and confidence issues that we're hearing and seeing with students, and Middlebrook is certainly no different. Something that this budget does not include that I think we should have discussions about moving forward are putting additional funds in place for things like having a outside professional services available, like Leslie Cohn-Ruberry, who made herself available to us in moments of true crisis this year, kids in crisis as well. The mental health service delivery is something that I'm concerned about, that right now we're in full reactive mode, not proactive mode. And I'm going to get to that later. And I think it's time to be proactive, not reactive in that regard. Glenn, you mentioned earlier the ask about the number of counselors and the caseload at the high school. Well, the caseload at the middle school is over 300 or around 300 per counselor. That doesn't include obviously some of the other mental health folks, but that's very taxing. And again, I think it gets to the point that I'm trying to make here that, you know, we need to really seriously consider being more proactive than reactive. In other words, when there's a moment, we deal with it and everybody drops everything they're doing and jumps in and does a beautiful job helping in those scenarios. But I think that it's important to recognize. I think about our nurse in our building and how her job has become as much clerical as it's been anything before. And that is really to the amount of time Nurse Nancy Flaherty spends chasing after families who've decided to travel and making sure, first of all, if they know the travel restrictions, they understand what they need to do relative to getting tested or not getting tested. And if they choose not to get tested, that they must quarantine for that full period. Many of our families are very good. They're the ones that notify us that they're traveling in the first place. Others, a child will arrive in school and say, oh yeah, I went to Vermont for the weekend. And then here we are in that spot of having to remove the child from the class, call a parent and having them come and pick them up, and then go through that process again. So again, I just want to think of that moment where any chance we get, we want to celebrate the collective incredible efforts of the staff in our building, and that includes our nurse, who is overtaxed and overmatched at what she's trying to do, less taking care about kids' health and more about the secretarial aspect of it. I'll move on to the third priority, and that is our facility infrastructure. And I want to make sure that as I'm talking about building and facilities, that you still keep in mind the impact on student learning throughout this. The upgrades to the facilities here have been put on hold year after year after year. I think that Jose Figueroa and Kevin will tell you that the detail, because this was my little bailiwick even as a dean when I was here, that I put together quite a comprehensive A to Z list of everything that Middlebrook needs. And more often than not, that takes a back seat to programming and staffing, as it should on a certain level. But on another level, it means that we now need to highlight the areas of the building that really need some help. And you know, parts of Middlebrook are now the oldest in the district, even older than me. So you think about parts of the building that were built in the early 60s, opened up in 65. That's something that we need to just hit the pause button. You think about your own house and when it was built and how you wouldn't be able to not do the necessary upgrades in your own home. Well, now you've got a building that has thousands of students coming through every day, hundreds of adults that come through every day. For even in our newest section of the building, that's 23 years of that. That's in the what we call the new building, the Cheryl and Peterson wing. We still refer to part of one of our gymnasiums as the new gym, and it's almost 25 years old. Just understanding that there is normal wear and tear. I want to be careful that I don't make it sound like this is due to any neglect from the maintenance or custodial crew here. That's just quite the contrary, that they're doing their level best to try to cover with putty and paint what really needs to be repaired and remodeled. And it's time for us to really take a very serious look at that. And one of your questions that came up, I'll I'll get to those questions when I'm done with this part of the presentation. But we've had years of renovations that haven't been done, and carpet replacement in halls and that sort of thing. Just a quick hit list of some of the things that really jump out is the auditorium renovation, our fire alarm system that's outdated and needs to be replaced, our PA system that is outdated and replace, something that Eric's trying to do in the meantime right now to try to put a repair in place. Our LLC was supposed to be remodeled and that has been deferred. We have art room renovations that have been deferred as well to the tune of about $30,000 per room. Our 7 Green wing needs a sprinkler replacement system put in place. Ceiling tiles, vapor barrier installation. You heard Kevin mention that at the budget meeting the other night, talking about the vapor barrier installation that needs to be done. Lighting replacement. Our old gym door, the door that replaced is in the middle of the old gym that every time we turn that key, we sure hope it's going to work this time. And it's gotten to that point where, you know, repairmen are always coming out to do those sorts of things, and it's a need to look at that. So we just need to not just be clear. I hope I've said it enough here that we need to not forget about the Middlebrook facility. Years of that deferred work and plans for renovation, I think are beginning to haunt us and now impact students. And we need to get back to our building needs, kind of that 5-year plan approach, and then hold to those plans, recognizing that sometimes that's very painful. But we have a potential major renovation facing us here at the Brook. And just by way of a hint of one of the questions that asked about it, is one of the things that Jose did, and I think very intelligently, was to have Turner Construction come in and do really an audit of our building to find out, you know, the difference between piecemealing some of these jobs and what would it cost to fix everything all at once. You know, what would that look like? And we're hoping to get whether it's a bid or an offer from them to understand what exactly the scope of that job would look like and what the price tag would look like. I do have a little bit of a wish list that might turn into more of a, not this coming year, but the next year, that I want us to think about. And I say that from a standpoint of recognizing that the Middlebrook budget is very lean this year, but I want you to understand that there are some things that I'm holding in the balance for moving into the following year. One is additional FTE for a PE or health teacher. Historically, our PE classes have been very high. COVID requirements are an additional challenge to that, just in terms of social distancing. You heard Andrea speak a little bit about the additional social worker at the high school. Originally, we were hoping that 0.5 of a social worker would be here as well. We decided to defer that for 1 more year, and I think the hope is that, so not this coming year, but the year after, that there would be additional time for that social worker here at Middlebrook. There certainly are financial implications to that. We're also looking into the possibility of looking for a social worker intern or a social worker or a psych intern, if those opportunities arise. And frankly, they're not out there, because you get to a point where there are school systems that have them, but then you interview those individuals and you recognize these are not the people that meet the quality that we need, certainly in our building. As we shift into a focus about math, you know, how that's going to shift in our needs for additional instruction in math, up or down, in fairness to the point, is something that we want to make sure that the board is aware of. You know, in the past, we used to have what we called an SSR model, sustained silent reading model, and something along those lines to think about, is there room for a sustained math model, a sort of idea. You get the idea. I'm being silly about it, but that's the basic idea. But you know, the other layer of it is, where might we get writing intervention support and help? Where might we get executive function support for kids that are not just identified through support services? I would love to start looking at the opportunity to expand our, for lack of a better way of looking at it, world language department here, in terms of, right now, Middlebrook offers French and Spanish. Our French numbers over the years have started to decline a little bit. I asked Sandy Lund, the registrar at the high school this week, for the numbers of what are the world languages that we offer at the high school, and how might we start to be a better feeder to those programs here. So in the long run, I'd love for us to look at the opportunity to have American Sign Language offered at Middlebrook, to have an opportunity, maybe when you look at the numbers, there are significant numbers of students that take German at the high school. Is there a way to introduce German at a middle school level by way of a exploratory program here? Perhaps children in 8th grade could have a trimester course where they would have exposure to German, exposure to maybe Latin or Greek, exposure to American Sign Language. How might we offer those opportunities for different groups? And then again, I'll just hammer home again that need for recognizing that, having the opportunity for some principal's discretion to be able to recognize that, the staff needs to pick me up. They need an opportunity to be validated and understood, to say, we appreciate you, we love what you're doing, and we thank you for that. And every time I have a conversation with Chuck Smith, I ask him for more summer curriculum days. So with the thought that we will have significant impact on our cell schedule, we will need summer curriculum days. And that's not something that we will plan for an increase right now. It's something that's already, Chuck already has that. I just need to steal about 39 summer curriculum days from him. So thank you for your time to listen to this. What I want to do is jump into the questions that we received today and see what I could do to try to capture the language around them.
Jory, can I ask a quick question before you go into that? When you were talking about the facility upgrades, you brought up the fire alarm system, burglar system, and possibly the PA system. Are those any life cycle issues or life safety issues that we need to address, or that the town needs to address? Or is it?
Your Freudian slip was excellent, because I think it's more about life cycle than life safety cycle.
Okay.
I'm not worried that we're in danger. Otherwise, this would have been taken care of long ago. With Jose is all over it in that regard. I'm not worried about that. But when you think about the opportunity and really the technology that's available now versus what was available 25 years ago is significantly different. And for us to be on top of what we're able to do now in this environment, this world, it's just something that we need to be very careful. It's not unlike your roof. It serves a purpose for a certain amount of time, but at some point you need to upgrade and do the right thing by that. So in this case, it's functioning properly. But anecdotally, an example would be when the alarm goes off here, there's a panel in the main office, and there are special codes in there that no one seems to know what these codes mean, but you need to kind of cycle through a number of things to then figure out there's an issue in the kitchen, or there's an issue in the auditorium. So not only is that an issue for us on staff, but there's a handful of us, myself included, that have the institutional memory to know what some of these codes and things are. And we have a book that, if someone else needed to, they could. It's just really antiquated. You need a system that's going to tell you, go look at such and such a room. The other part of that is when the fire department or first responders arrive, they're doing the same thing. So what does that mean? So they're also telling us it's time to do something. So again, it's more about that it's time to upgrade. And Eric, I saw you nodding your head. So would you agree with that?
Yes, the new system will tie into a number of the life safety systems that we've started implementing across the district. So upgrading would be helpful, because we can't tie into the current system due to its age.
Okay.
Yeah, Jory, if I could step in, and the members are on the new members on the board really probably don't have very little knowledge of this. We went through this whole thing with Miller Driscoll over the years. Defer, put off. And it ended up costing the town almost $40 million. And I mean, you can pay me today, or you can pay me a whole much more tomorrow. We've got to get the plan in place and the dollars committed and the commitment to do what needs to be done at Middlebrook now. It's foolish of us, but we have a history of doing it in this town, of deferring, putting off. We can't spend the money. And it only comes back to bite you in the end in a big way. And I just hope we can get something together this year that can move this ball forward for Middlebrook. because I lived through it with Milledge Driscoll, both the before and the during, and the after now is pretty nice, but it wasn't nice. It really wasn't.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Glenn. And I would agree with you that it'll be nice to know. I think this next step where we hear what Turner has to offer, at least will give us an idea of what we're looking at. And then be able to, as the professionals look at it and say, what is it that they're offering that we don't really need, or it's excessive, or what is it that really needs to be done and done right now?
Yeah, we just need to take care of the needs. And there's a lot of them. Nothing nice to have, or wouldn't that be good, but whatever. But there's a lot of needs that have to be addressed. And if we don't do it, it's just going to cost us more in the long run.
Well,
Really
yeah, but this sounds like you've got a whole list. Turner's working on that, and it's something that can be addressed, and not necessarily in this budget. I just wanted to make sure that there was no like serious issues that we needed to correct before. But you answered the question that everything is, safe. The fire department's not coming here and giving us fines for something. So,
right.
So okay.
Well, it's, in the scheme of, I think what Turner's going to help us do is that instead of planning for in our budget for $30,000 an art room, and then planning for the however many thousands of dollars to upgrade the LLC, what would it cost to take the step back and say, what are all the things that need to be done at Middlebrook? And it's going to be X dollars. And that's something that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, can become more of a capital bonding issue instead of our operating budget.
Definitely not part of this conversation, though.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, we need to set aside some time to figure out a plan for these major renovations and how to handle, what are basically capital requests. And I know Anne, I put her off the other night, but Kevin, at some point, we need to address how to do this.
Yeah, correct. I know that, and that's is the momentary lag is just getting the information from Turner so we can understand the scope at Middlebrook. And then I think, as I said last week, it's what's the plan, what's the approach, and then, how do we have to, garner some involvement here from, I think, both the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen, because it is as we were reminded earlier today, we're renters, not owners.
Sorry about
I know that I had said to Jose, I had asked him just this week, hey, I've got a meeting on Wednesday, any chance? And he copied me on the email to Turner to say, hey, what's going on? What's the story with? And, there's still a couple of pieces that they were still trying to nail down with different vendors, et cetera. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to hear something soon. I just don't know how soon, but I know Jose's on it.
And the bathrooms are in this year's budget.
There's $60,000 on the remodeling repair line to address the bathrooms outside the auditorium.
Okay.
That's a perfect example, Deb, because you think about was it 3-4 years ago when we had that phase 1, phase 2 of the bathrooms here, and those bathrooms were going to be phase 2, and it just never happened. It got deferred. It's a perfect example of it.
Right, exactly.
So if I could try to jump into some of the questions you guys have shared, and we'll kind of go through some of the ones as best I can. All right.
Sure.
So one question was, please explain the increase in training and conferences. It's 41,510. And this is really due to the freezes. 80% of the funds for the 1920 were not used, and 98% of the 2021 budget funds were not used. And it's still, what we're budgeting for this coming year is still less than what we budgeted for 3 years ago. So there is a little bit of a lag here in terms of recognizing that we're trying to play a little bit of catch up there. I know that's the language that one of you used earlier. As far as the, well, here the question was, math improvement is a district goal. Are there sufficient funds at Middlebrook to support that goal? And I think it goes back to the point that Chuck was making earlier, that we really need to develop time for teachers to do the work, and then opportunities for the professional learning that we need to make sure is always in our budget. I think to a certain degree, we can say yes to that. I think Trudy would say no, that the that this budget includes materials and Learn Zillion, et cetera, but does not include a budget for PD, because at the time the budget was put in, we were now having conversations about math being the math achievement was the priority. So with that in mind, her suggestion is that we might consider NWEA responsive lesson planning for all math teachers. Probably all math and ELA teachers make sense. And that is roughly $1,000 per 2-hour session. And we'd need 2 sessions. The other important piece is the professional development with CES to support our ongoing work with illustrative math implementation. So that estimate would be about $2,500. And that's kind of fresh off the hot press from Trudy. Next
Sorry,
question
can I ask you a question?
Sure.
When you're talking about playing catch up with professional development, so every year our teachers would go to a certain number of conferences or somebody would come speak to them. Are we trying to take that level and bump it up a little bit to play catch up? Or what are you thinking in terms of that?
No, I think what you're looking at is actual to budget now, that it looks like an incredible increase, and it's not. It's really back to more in line with what we were doing 3 years ago. It's catch up in that there were certainly aspects to it that didn't happen.
Right.
You know, I'm proud and excited to share the wealth of knowledge that's in this building. There's some incredible professionals could teach most of our PD anyway, but there is a reality to you know, the piece that I think it was Chuck who said it earlier, that you know, even our coaches need to go get professional learning themselves, and so there's aspects of that we want to make sure that we're not losing.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the detail for your professional learning line, and so there's a proposal of 17.5 for a range of it looks like some smaller conferences. So one is with the looks like Steve Armstrong from the state, so on inquiry, and then another is to provide for teachers to participate in the TC Institute on Equity and Inclusion. You've also got some Power School University training, the web where everyone belongs training, and looks like some NELMS conferences as well.
Within that budget, it's not possible to cover the recommendations of Trudy.
You just have to make some choices. You have to swap some things out.
Yeah, but you know, in that line, if you look at it, training and conferences, 2018-19 was only $6,000. That's 3 years ago. Now we're talking about $23,000. I mean, that's an incredible. I mean, 3 years ago we did $6,000. The year after that, $8,000. This year, obviously, we didn't. Things got suspended. Whatever. It was 12, but now we're asking for 23,000. It just seems. I mean, that's a huge jump over a 3-year period.
Yeah, you'd have to go back and look at I think you'd have to, it'd be worthwhile, you know, Marianne, maybe we can grab this, the actuals from 15, 16, 16, 17, and 17.
Okay, maybe so.
Well, here's why I say that, because I know when I was working with Lauren on these budgets over the last several years, when we were looking to make reductions, this was a line where we certainly took some dollars out. So a 5-year average might make more sense to look as, or a 5-year look rather than a 2 look.
3 year. Okay, all right, fine.
And then my question would be, you know, rather than say, okay, every year we're going to need X number of dollars sort of to do our normal thing. If it, you know, what would it change if it were more targeted? Because again, next year we've set math as a priority and language arts as a priority. And then to hear that enough PD at a relatively small amount isn't going to get covered by the request that's in there now. I'm just a little, you know, just help me understand that. I mean, at some point, you know, like maybe, you know, just seeing the sort of what has to happen every year, and then, you know, the priorities on math and ELA and why they don't get covered first.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile to go back and just look at the specific allocations.
Sure, absolutely. And that's not to diminish the other requests. It's just it is a little hard to kind of go through some of those budget pages and figure it out. So I have been more reliant on the summary page.
Sure.
But, you know, to think that we need PD, you know, money of, you know, $2,000 or what is it, $2,500 for math, which is a priority, and it's not in there. And then some of the things you read don't have anything to do with math. And I'm not saying they're not necessary, but, you know, do we add a little bit or do we make some trade-offs, I guess is my question. Because we want to really keep this budget aligned with our goals and assumptions.
And what I'd want to check with Chuck, what you don't see here are the training and conference that runs through one of his grants.
That's right.
So
That's
I would
true.
like,
That's true.
I would like to make sure that those items that you're mentioning now are not the items that he's covering in the grant.
Yeah.
So there is development that takes place that isn't reflected in this budget.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, you know, Chuck, it's a Title II or Title III. And it picks up a portion of it.
Yeah, okay, good point. Good point. Yeah, we have to always remember there's district funds and what's allocated to the building and what's in the district. You probably need to hear both presentations before it can make sense.
Right, and there's two pieces to one of the grants, and I know that one piece goes to training and conference, so.
That's right.
Okay.
Title III.
Marion, do you know how much he has on his grant?
I could get you a list of how much they are. So Chuck would have the consolidated grant, which would be Title I, II, and III that he oversees. Out of that, part of it goes to staffing and part of it goes to usually professional development.
It'd be interesting to hear how much those total. I would be curious. Yeah.
Yep, we could break it out. So they're usually, the consolidated grants on that level are usually a 2-year grant.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
Okay, thank you.
Jory, are we back to questions about the budget by line item, or you want to do the other questions you have?
Yeah, I think there were some questions because the rest of it, they're just their staffing increases and they're just their salary. You know, they're just the kind of the step in salary increases. There is a note here that half of a PE teacher needs to be reallocated to the high school. Is that accurate?
well, Karen and I were looking at that. It's Fernandez, it's Anna Fernandez. And I just need some clarification as to where she's actually residing because she started as a 0.5, she went to a 1.0, and I just need to make sure that the dollars are in the right place. It's not going to change your FTE counts. It's not going to change any of that, but part of her salary may need to go to the high school. But I can say right now, it's all sitting in Middlebrook. So I want to confirm with everybody, where is she actually working? So.
Yeah, George, she's 1.0 with you at Middlebrook?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right,
Okay.
so they're in the right.
In health right now here.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
so
It looks like it's a big jump here, but that's because she had.
Because she was a 0.5 last year
Correct.
for you, and she's not this year.
Correct.
yeah. So the other questions are just about salary increases and their
Right, and I saw the one, family and consumer science, I think was one, and that's basically, that's the lane changes we were talking about yesterday. That's somebody going from a bachelor's to a master's. So that's a higher increase. I thought there was another one though that came up. But most of them, that is what it is. It's where they're moving from where they were last year and where they are now.
You know, and looking at Middlebrook, looking at the high school and at Miller Driscoll, I understand those changes. It still strikes me that Cider Mill, for some reason, just stands out as an outlier.
I've got an answer for you. We're going to review it this afternoon and then I'll send it to you.
Okay, great. All right, good.
Right. Right. There's a couple factors that went into Cider Mill, but I just want to review them with everybody first before I.
So I'm not crazy then, I hope.
No, you're not crazy. But it's multiple things. It's not as simple as just saying they moved from one lane to another or had a percent increase.
Yeah, that's more to it because it's such a big number. Yeah.
There's about 3 things that went into their changes.
Okay, great.
So.
Joy, a question for you, if I may. When you in your opening monologue, you talked about language arts being up, I think by like $45,000 or something in your budget. But did I hear that correctly?
No,
No?
no.
I thought I heard you say that language arts in your budget was showing an increase. And then because that raised the question, because actually it's showing a decrease, and that was what I got confused about.
No, I was that when you just said an increase, I was saying, no, it's actually a decrease.
It is, okay, then I misunderstood. All right, my apologies. Okay, great, good, great. Great. Yeah.
Joy, I think you said it's not in this year's budget, but did you imply there may be some FTE changes to come with the revised schedule at some point?
Not right now, no.
But not now?
No.
But, okay, maybe down the road or TBD?
Sure, potentially, because I think that as I don't think this is a 21-22 proposition, but I think down the road, something that Kevin and I chatted about very briefly. So forgive me, Kevin, if it surprises you, but just that idea of if we were going to include things like American Sign Language here, there obviously would be an impact on staffing. Whether or not that's a 0.2 of someone that's already teaching at the high school that would go from a point something to a 1.0.
Yeah.
That sort
Okay.
of thing.
Yeah, I was more zeroed in on your changing the schedule for math and if that had impact. So, okay, but not next year.
Not for next year, no.
Okay. So I can't believe I'm going to ask this question because it's moving in totally the wrong direction in terms of money. But it gets at what you said the counselor ratio was at Middlebrook and what it is at the high school. And I know that they are totally, there's apples and oranges to many, many respects. But I wonder, is there an industry or a professional recommended ratio? And I guess I am less worried about that, but more about the immediate SEL needs for next year. So putting counselors, just remembering that they're dealing with 300 students, and then the request for additional social worker time. So I am just wondering, again, given our priorities, I am glad to see that we have additional support at the high school for mental health. Obviously, in addition to COVID, there have been some tragedies there. But I'm wondering at Middlebrook, given the sort of the overload, not overload, maybe it's normal for a middle school, but still 300 kids is 300 kids for next year. To what extent could we look at increasing that 0.5 social worker to a 1.0 position or a 0.8 position to provide Middlebrook some SEL help? It didn't make it into the budget, so my guess is there must have been more urgent needs. But again, I'm trying to align what we said in our goals and assumptions with what we see in the budget. And I don't necessarily want to see it as an ad, but I wonder if it could, if anybody had looked at a trade-off there, or if it's worth looking at.
We did look at it. I'm sorry, Kevin, did you want to take this? Go ahead.
Nope, go for it.
We did look at it. The high school position is bumping from a 5.5 to a 1.0. That's the additional 0.5.
Right.
So an additional staff member at Middlebrook would have been an additional staff member, an additional benefits package. And that was kind of the breaking point budgetarily in terms of the decision making. We would.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of a 1.0. I was thinking at a portion, the way that proportionally
a portion of a new. It would be a new portion, new person. If we hired a 0.5, for example, it would be a new person 0.5 with a benefits package, and that's where.
Got it. Okay.
It's not just the increase of a currently employed part-time person.
Okay.
Yeah, guys, what would be the right thing to do in this environment? Is the bottom line. I don't care if it's additional 1, additional 1.5, additional 2. what is the right thing and the thing that we need to do in this environment to take care of our students.
The right thing to do in this environment would be to add a 1.0 social worker to Middlebrook. That would be the right thing to do.
And that's exactly what we should be talking about doing. I mean, guys, you know, we just can't keep our head in the sand about the impact.
Well, we don't, I don't want us to think we're keeping our head in the sand. We're taking a step forward.
Yeah, but if that's the right thing to do, and that's what we should do to take care of the kids, then why are we not asking for it? Why are we not proposing to do it? I just don't think we know the depth as well as we should of the problems and the issues these kids are facing. I really don't. Not them personally, impacted by the families and all the things that have gone on there. And they're the most important assets, the most important things that we are responsible for. And we need to do what we need to do, period, to take care of them as well as we possibly can. That's I'm done. That's it.
Are there ways of, if it's not an FTE, are there ways of, and again, I'm not asking to increase the budget, but I'm wondering if there's a trade-off. And again, you may have already had these difficult conversations, but are there ways of getting, I don't know, private provider consultant kind of as needed hours? Does that make sense? Consultant hours versus FTE?
Careful
you know, there
about
are
bargaining
lots
unit
of
work.
ways.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry. I'm
No,
sorry
go
to
ahead.
interrupt. I just think we have to be very careful about offering bargaining unit work to non-bargaining unit members. You know, if it's a position that exists in a bargaining unit, we're really required to offer it as a bargaining unit position. So I think, you know, I'm sure Andrea can offer some other creative ways that we might offer support, but if it's truly a position that is very similar to a social worker, we have to be very careful about not offering it as a union position.
Yeah, he mentioned, Jory, didn't you mention a crisis provider? Sort of, I got the feeling that was on a as needed basis this year, or am I wrong? Probably wrong.
We provided that earlier in this, and that was, we ran some groups for staff back.
Oh, okay, got it. All right. All right, well, it's totally a question, and I'm absolutely not looking to increase the budget. Just wondering, and I have to assume you've had the trade-off conversations, but I did just want to raise it. I was a little struck by what Jory said.
Yep, and Jory's not wrong. We made a decision and we chose to hold on tight for one more year. And but next year at this time, you'll be hearing about Middlebrook.
Jory, can I ask you a question about the counselors in other middle schools in our DIRG? How many students per counselor? What's the ratio?
What's hard is to do apples to apples. You know, our counselors do different things than their counselors, for example. But, you know, we're certainly within the range in terms of caseloads for kids to our brother and sister districts.
Okay. How, in terms of counselors, ours do different things than theirs. What do you mean by that?
So, for example, scheduling here at Middlebrook is done by one of the deans, whereas in another district, scheduling might be handled by a counselor. You have, you know, groups that are run by our counselors, both individual and small group, whereas in other school districts, they may be done by a psychologist or a social worker. So it just depends on how, you know, you've allocated the resources in your building. It's different depending upon how you look at it. And I think the point I was really trying to make was that, especially in light of our present pandemic situation and just the mental health crisis that I think we all recognize is very real in this world right now, is that we're in reactive mode. And I think we need to be more in a proactive mode.
So Jory, let me just weigh in because I actually have data. We pulled this information about a year ago. So I have personnel data from 2018-19. This comes from the state of Connecticut, and it generally lags at least a year. So we're trying to update it for 19-20. But in 18-19, at the middle school level, and the way, just again, sorry for the over-labored description here, but the state doesn't single out school counselors. It's combined with social workers and psychologists. And so for Middlebrook, we recorded 6 between counselors, social workers, and psychologists with a ratio of 167.2. All of our other DIRG counterparts are running ratios that are lower than that. So Ridgefield in 1819 was running a ratio of 133, Westport 128, Weston 116, Darien 104, New Canaan 133. So at the middle school level in this domain, we are running a higher ratio of counselors, social workers, psychologists to student than our DIRG counterparts.
Okay, thank you.
Joy, I just one other quick question from your budget. The numbers are fantastic. I mean, it's just nits and gnats. But there was one thing that jumped out at me was dues and memberships is more than double this past year. It's up 100%, almost 2 or 3 times what it was 2 years ago. Is there something specific there that is happening that would drive that, or is that an opportunity for us to say, wait a minute?
So I think a big portion of it, without looking, Glenn, is the budget freezes. So we didn't pay them. And now
but looking at 2018-19, it was only $3,030. It was $3,200 before the budget freezes. Then the following year went to $2,400. Last year, and now we're looking at $11,500 for this coming year. I'm just asking. That just seems to be an extraordinary big jump.
So what I can do for you, Glenn, is I'll go back and I'll look through the details of what was submitted and put together what the list is of what they're looking for under that category.
Yes, 100% increase and triple 200% over the prior, whatever year.
There's also an aspect to it that things moved where they're aligned in New World.
Oh, okay. Could be
an aspect to that. So I think Marianne, research will help us.
Okay, good. Yeah, great. Thank you. That was the only one. Other than that, your numbers are right on the money. I'm a lot of work. Well done.
Thank Karen Lamatia. Feel free to send her a note, okay?
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I started with her, I'll end with her.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question about and this is just something I don't understand. When a budget is frozen, does that mean there are some things that we should be paying that we don't pay? So do we owe money on some things? Like, do we have outstanding bills for things?
No, what it means is we meet our obligations of what are mandatory to meet, but anything that is extra, we reevaluate and say, do we really need to do this now?
Okay. All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Other questions for me?
No, thank you, Jory. That's a lot of ground to cover. So literally from, bathrooms to social workers. So
The short order cook, right?
yeah, you do it all.
Right. Happy to.
Okay, are there any other questions for Jory? I think I'd like to have Kevin, if you don't mind, or perhaps you can weigh in whenever you want, of course. But we had asked a little bit about, looking at the 3.9, what would your approach be if it had to be less than that? And then, just open it up to some board members' thoughts about what direction and what ideas we have. And I'm only pushing because on Tuesday, given our town charter, calendar, we absolutely have to approve a budget to submit to the Board of Finance by then. So we have a few minutes today, we have tomorrow night, and then, perhaps we have some of Tuesday nights, although I'd rather sort of see a product that we don't have to make major changes to next Tuesday. So I don't know who wants to start, or Kevin, do you want to give us some direction on how to have that conversation?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll just give you in a sentence, my just reaction so far to the questions in the conversation leads me to believe at the moment that the total proposal 3.9% increase over this year's spending feels too much, too high. And so, no one has necessarily said that directly, but just that's kind of my sense of things. And so I'm working and have been giving this some thought already about how we, how we might be able to go back and revisit some of these budget areas. It's my intention to come back to the board, with some proposals about where we might cut and what that dollar amount is. And so just process wise, we will look at non-personnel accounts and see, for example, are there areas within training and conferences we can continue to refine or defer? While there's not much in, facilities repair and maintenance, maybe there's some things there. So I'll, whatever that short list may be. And then really, if we're going to bring the total cost down, we do have to focus on personnel because that's where the dollars are. And so I'll come back to you with some thoughts about some proposed either, total reductions or possibilities we may defer for another year, and just, what the impact is on the operation as well as the dollar amount tied to whatever those positions may be. But it would be helpful for me if I'm way off base, it'd be helpful to hear that. But if, if individual board members have, just thoughts so far, it'd be helpful for me to hear those.
Well, I felt like bringing a budget of 3.9% increase from last year is too high also. I am nervous because this has been a really difficult year. And I think I would like to see some reductions. I'm especially concerned with the teacher-student ratio at the high school that has dropped. So, I think it's one of those, if you can come back and bring it down to like 2.9, or 2.5, or, I think an increase is fine since we haven't had one for a while, but almost 4% just seems really high for this town right now. That's all.
I feel the same. And I also hear what Jory's saying too. Like, I'm not sure it can all come out of the facilities budget, which is what we typically do, because eventually we're going to get to a point where there's a massive need at Middlebrook. And I feel like that is what happened at Miller Driscoll, and our current sixth graders lived through all of that. And many of them significantly impacted their learning significantly, having the building completely redone. And then unfortunately they left and everybody else enjoyed the beautiful building. So I'd love to get to a point where we are not having to do a major renovation all at the same time. So if we can, keep some of those things and do them year by year, if that's possible, that would be great. So if there's a way for some of this to come down and not have it come out of that, that would be super. I think our town, I hope they recognize that there is going to have to be some sort of increase because of everything that's happened this year. I mean, there's just a different need and a different change. But the number right now, unfortunately, is pretty high.
Okay, so Kevin, can we talk a little bit about that tomorrow afternoon, or do you want to save it for tomorrow night? I'd hate to, we can't do it Tuesday. It's just too.
Yeah, no, I think I'd like to, what I'm going to ask is I'm not sure, I know I'm on the docket for tomorrow, Chuck is, and so we'll really try to be compact in our reviews. I did ask Kim Zemo to join me because I think it's important that you do kind of hear what SEL work is underway and is planned. I think that's really key. But what I'd like to do is just, we'll be as quick as possible so we can use the balance of the time just to get into the opportunities that we can look for to bring the total budget proposal down.
Okay, so Henry, just as a reminder, am I right that 1% of a budget, this proposal budget, is $860,000?
That's the number I've been using, Marianne, yes?
Close to it.
80, okay. Yeah, 855.
Okay, so what I would suggest is that board members, obviously send more questions, but also send Kevin some suggestions if he hasn't heard them already, just to reiterate what points we wanted to make. So rather than, keep discussing it today, send suggestions, send some questions, send hints, send, where you're coming from, those sort of things. And then we can just have a discussion tomorrow afternoon. And then I'm thinking that tomorrow night, oh my gosh, it is tomorrow night, that the Board of Finance joins us, right?
Yes.
And that's great, but I'd also like some time for the Board of Ed only to discuss. So maybe have the joint discussion and then reserve some time for the Board of Ed to discuss it on our own. Does that sound okay? Is that legal?
It is. We have to make sure that I think the meeting is noticed appropriately. And so we might just send a note to Jeff or give him a call and say, hey, we want to do maybe 7 to 8 BOE, BOF, and then 8 to 9, just BOE.
Yeah, exactly. I just think that the 6 of us need some time to talk and look at your suggestions. And by that time, we will have heard the Board of Finance questions and discussion as well. So if we can talk with them for no more than an hour and then reserve the rest of our meeting for just us, I think that would be helpful.
Great.
Deborah, am I correct that there will not be a town meeting this year? That ultimately the Board of Finance is the one who's going to set the budget?
Not yet.
No, I think actually the opposite is true. I think there will be a town meeting this year. The governor did not come out with an order saying, you could be flexible on what that looked like. So if that doesn't come forward, there will be more of a traditional town meeting. And, even if we had to have it outside, I think that's one idea that's been floated. So it's not determined exactly right now, Glenn, but it is certainly not off the table. Right now, it's on the table.
Okay, well, that's better for us, I think. Okay, good.
Okay. All right, so send as many comments, questions, other ideas to Kevin ASAP. We'll pick this conversation up tomorrow afternoon, and then we'll reserve an hour for our board member only discussion after Board of Finance. We have our joint discussion. And Kevin, does the Board of Finance, that first hour, is that something that you've already given your budget presentation? So maybe you and I can talk offline, but I need a reminder of what that conversation looks like. So whatever the expectations are, we can meet them. So I can have that conversation with you. But anyway, I'm just realizing it's 24 hours away. So, all right. So anything else, Kevin, that we need to do this afternoon?
You've met your obligations.
Okay, then I'm going to adjourn the meeting, and thanks everyone for hanging in there. And again, I hope everybody realizes that, we're trying to decide between the critical and the important, which is just a very challenging thing to do. So thanks.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.